Good afternoon, Evan, and thank you for joining us at the Connect conference. I'm Eric Sugar, the CEO of LineZero, and today I'm here with Nancy MacKay to chat about building a connection. Nancy, welcome to Connect, and please, if you can introduce yourself and introduce MacKay CEO Forums, it'd be great for the whole crowd to get to know you.
Thanks, Eric, for inviting me to join you here today. I'm Nancy MacKay, and I'm the founder and CEO of MacKay CEO Forums. Our dream is to populate the world with inspiring leaders, and we do that by offering peer learning groups around the world for CEOs, executives, and business owners.
Excellent, Nancy. You and I have had some great conversations, and I've always really appreciated your vision, and I've started to implement it at LineZero about love your employees and loving your customers. And I think sharing your perspective with the community to understand why it's really important to use the language of love and understand how that can help people build a really sticky culture, especially in these times where we're all apart and separated physically, but needing to be more tightly connected than ever.
Well, Eric, I have to say this. One of the things I love about you is anytime I bring any new tools into our CEO peer groups, I'm so grateful that you're one of our members and you participate in one of our peer learning groups. You take those tools and you bring them into your own organization, and then you want to share them with the world. So thank you for sharing the passion around what needs to change in the COVID world so that we can all become much more closely connected, because we know that there's a huge challenge right now where people are desperate for social connection and people are suffering from social isolation. And so we have to do things differently. We have to use a new language. We have to use new tools. So I started to introduce the concept of that trust and love are your biggest game changers in 2020 and beyond. And I know that people they're okay with the word trust and getting to know people and liking people. But then when they use the L word or the love word in business, people start to squirm and go, what are you talking about? And I really just fundamentally believe that, you know, there's romantic love and then there's business love. And business love really means that you care so much about the human beings that you are in business with, that you would do anything for them. And you'd support them with their families, with their business, with their own personal challenges. And so we're moving away from business is about just transacting with other people to business is actually an honor and a privilege to connect with and accomplish amazing goals and objectives in business with human beings that you love and they love you and what you stand for, what your purpose is. And that's why we're doing business with people. It's because we love them. It's not just about liking them and trusting them. That's kind of the old world. That was probably good enough pre-COVID. But in today's world, you have to take your relationships to the next level of really loving the people that you are spending time with.
So I know when I brought love and described that on my first town hall in my team, I had the squirmy feeling, and we had some funny stories about people getting really uncomfortable and pushing back a little bit and saying, is love appropriate at the office? And what happens when you get misconstrued? I'm sure, again, stories make everything, but maybe you have a good story or a funny story about using love in one of the times where you said, oh, that's a surprise, and maybe tell the team a bit about, or the group a bit about that, if you have a story that's fun or interesting.
Well, it's a story that's fun and interesting and very an open-hearted story that I'll share. I was doing a session with, I don't know, like 100 CEOs talking about in today's world, we need to love the people that we're doing business with. And if we don't, we need to be finding new customers or different people that we're going to be doing business with. And he just said, stop. I don't love my customers. They're a pain in the butt to work with. They don't pay their bills on time. I'm in a slimy industry. They lack integrity. I hate my customers. And he said, today is the last day that I'm going to hate my customers. I'm going back to my team and I'm going to tell them, if we don't love our customers, we don't deserve to be doing business in today's world. And that was just so open-hearted of him to just declare that he was living in this negative energy space of really being, Eric, we call this below the line. in a negative emotional state around his customers and, oh my gosh, COVID, it's survival, it's horrible, and people are nasty, to shifted to, well, if I lived in a mindset of abundance and love, then I'm going to be wanting to go to work, and my employees are going to want to go to work, and we're going to want to be serving the people and doing business with people and loving the people. That's way more inspiring for me. So it just shifted everything for the entire audience and for him in particular. And then he called me up 2 weeks later and said, "You're not going to believe this. I think we're going to have our best year ever in 2020. And we literally have said goodbye to the customers that we don't love. And we're working more deeply with the customers we do love, and they love us." So that was a very happy, inspiring story for me to hear.
That's a great story, Nancy. And so one of our stories around this, and I love storytelling. It was around working with partners, and partners can sometimes have aims that are slightly different or pressures that are different than our pressures. And sometimes it causes frustration between the teams when there's misalignment on timing of an outcome. And I kind of said to the team, and my example of love was, we can't do what we do without our partners. Like, without partners like Workplace and Facebook, we cannot do our job. We can't help connect to businesses. We can't help create digital communities. So we need to understand that loving them is also understanding their pressures and aligning to their pressures, or at least respecting them and saying, hey, I get you're in trouble. I get you're under pressure. Here's what we're doing to support you, and here's why we're doing it. So that's kind of our version of that. And if I look at Tiana Love, the next piece that logically fits into that to me is vulnerability and empathy. And from a vulnerability perspective, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on authenticity and vulnerability in the workplace. I've moved into a high vulnerability position where I think probably pre-COVID, I had a bit of shields up or guard up, and I moved into a completely vulnerable position, and appropriate vulnerability, not inappropriate vulnerability. So my story is when I was literally nervous going to the grocery store, and I told our entire team, and I've told customers about, I'm an outgoing person, I travel all the time, I love to meet new people, and I went into a grocery store and I was not quite shaking, but it wasn't far off. So maybe a story from you on vulnerability and authenticity into a business life.
Well, I think it's everything in today's world, and it goes right along with this whole idea of business love, is if we could all show up as caring, vulnerable, and assertive business leaders, which means we're going to tell the truth, and we're going to do it in a very caring way and be vulnerable with each other, which telling the truth is what love is. When I care enough about you as another human being, that I am going to tell you the truth about how I'm feeling, the impact it's having on me, and what I need you to do, that changes everything from small talk and let's just talk about the hockey game to let's actually tell the truth with each other and have real conversations. And so being vulnerable, yeah, I mean, I'm all about that. It's not about hiding the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of negative things going on. It's not all rainbows and puppies. And as CEOs, we have our doubts and self-doubts. And a big part of that is just, like you said, going to the grocery store. You know, for me, it's about, gosh, you know, I'm concerned about all of the judgment that goes on around the BIPOC community or the Me Too movement, and just being vulnerable and declaring that that's something that I'm going to take a stand on, and that I want to be able to support people, invite other people to take a stand on it, so we can treat each other as human beings. And that it's not easy to say that out loud. It's not easy to share our own stories. You know, I've had my own challenges with, you know, men and inappropriate behaviors, being female in a male-dominated business world. So the thing is like, why don't we just tell the truth about, it's not all rainbows and puppies, and we all have our challenges and struggles. And why don't we find ways to support each other and have those real conversations? That's what vulnerability is all about. It's about shifting from the small talk that we're used to pre-COVID to really what's happening for you, no kidding, and how can I support you? And also talking about big dreams. You know this about me, Eric. I love it when people share, what are your big dreams? What is the impact you want to have in the world? And it's scary because people may judge you about what your big dreams are. And so that's what we have to be talking about, big dreams, our challenges, our struggles. how we can all come together to make the world a more inspiring world every day.
So you touched on something there, and I have the honor and pleasure of presenting to MacKay CEO Forum's peer groups as a speaker. And I was, again, vulnerable and super nervous. And I brought up BIPOC as part of my digital culture and community speech or talk to the groups. And I had a great response to it. And then I had people questioning lots of good questions, and it was challenging. So I'd love to get your perspective on BIPOC and how it's working and traveling through Canada in the business perspective or more globally, and maybe a little bit of time on that, Nancy, to understand your perspective on how we as leaders can support that.
Well, I think one of the things, Eric, is that at MacKay Forums, we're a B Corp, a beneficial corporation, which means we take a stand on, we want to be the best for the world, and we want to eradicate any type of discrimination, racism, sexism, elitism. We're totally taking a stand on that, as are all of the other B Corps around the world. And as an individual leader, the more I can have open-hearted conversations with other people that are uncomfortable. Like I got introduced to a Black CEO leading a very successful company, and he was introduced to MacKay Forums, and he was interested in exploring the opportunity, and I answered all of his questions, and then I stopped and I said, I just really, with your permission, I would love to ask you a question about I want to be able to support the BIPOC community. And there's a lot of confusion out there in terms of how I can and others. So can we have a conversation about what that's like for you to be a Black CEO in a minority group and what have you? And he started talking about the suffering that he's gone through, which is very similar to the suffering that I've gone through being a female in a male dominated. And we had this complete, and it was a very emotional conversation about, you know what? It's not about reliving the past and suffering with each other. It's about empowering each other to be truthful and have conversations and have people having conversations that are judgment free, because I don't know the right language to use. I don't know how I can support, but the more I can ask people to help me lead effectively, that's how social change happens, one person at a time. And it took courage for me to say to him, look, I don't really know how to relate that well to you, how to support you, but can you please help me figure out what I can do differently? So that's how it goes. Like, we just have to have open conversations and be vulnerable and admit that we don't know. I don't know what the proper language is. I don't know, but I do want to learn.
And I'll say that similar experience with even our internal team. We have BIPOC people on a team, and I brought it up again in my open office hours, my virtual connect with the team, and said, hey, I'm super uncomfortable. I want to help. I want to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And same thing, we had a very emotional group conversation as an entire team. We had people describe events that had happened to them, both in Canada and the US, that we would never, it's really hard to relate to. And I think asking the question is creating that connection, asking, how can we support? How can we help? What can we do differently? Those are all pieces, I think, that at least are the first steps on a journey that's not going to be easy. So I appreciate that perspective a lot, Nancy.
And we're going to make mistakes. And part of being vulnerable is just realizing, you know, I could mess up. I could say something to offend, that offends people, which I don't jump out of bed every morning thinking, geez, I hope I can say something to offend people. And at the same time, if I do, then I would love that feedback, so I can adjust my language and I can be more effective and I can be more inspiring for the people. Because that's what I want to do. I want the world I want to live in is a judgment-free world where we treat each other as human beings with a lot of respect, a lot of empathy. That's one of the other things that you were asking about, Eric, is how do we seriously dial up the empathy for others? And a big part of that is judgment-free, is being able to step into the other person's shoes to understand their experience and how they see things, and not to make them wrong about it and not to beat myself up about it, but to just understand we all have different perspectives. So I think that's a big part of how we can just make this world a more inspiring world, is step into each other's shoes before we take action, before we say anything. It's huge.
Any tips or tricks you could give the CEOs, the executives on this call about how to be more empathetic in the workplace? I think we often struggle, or I for sure struggle with how to be empathetic at times, and maybe even a little more so as we're virtual and disconnected. But I think empathy it has the ability to be a superpower. And listening to you, I often observe, I think you're almost an expert at empathy and vulnerability, and you create this open environment where people can share. So I'd love to maybe hear some tips and tricks from that.
I think one of the things is to realize that there's a difference between suffering and empathy. And so, for example, I get CEOs, and all through COVID the past 6 months, calling me up going, I think I'm going to go bankrupt. My wife just left me. My kids hopped up on drugs. I mean, I've never experienced, I've been leading MacKay forums for 15 years, working with hundreds of CEOs and executives and business owners. I've never experienced a time where there's so much suffering going on and mental health issues, right? So the only way I've survived this with our community of over 1,100 is I remind myself every day that when someone is suffering and they're having their challenges and they're overwhelmed, it doesn't serve them for me to suffer with them. So empathy is, I'm going to step into their shoes and have empathy and try to understand how they're feeling and understand their perspective so that I can better respond to where they're at versus reacting by jumping into the suffering with them. And then we make really bad decisions when we're in a negative emotional state, when we're in a state of desperation and overwhelm. So it's really being clear about setting the boundaries and be like healthy boundaries around. We can really help people by having empathy, because then we can stay in a positive emotional state and help them make great decisions. And we don't serve them when we're suffering. And then we're trying to judge other people, make other people wrong. I don't know if that makes sense, Eric. It's a big topic, but that's what I've been working on.
That's super helpful, Nancy. Maybe a couple last quick questions. One on burnout. And I think one of the things I think is a barrier to building connections and to having kind of your authentic self and being present is this aspect of COVID related burnout and this always on technology, Zoom calls, Teams calls, booked from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. nonstop, back to back. How do you talk to all your peer groups and the people in your life about managing burnout, and what are you seeing, and what do we think people can do to prevent that burnout?
Well, I think one of the things, Eric, and I chaired a CEO peer group meeting recently, and the first person came on Zoom, and he's like, "Oh, I really hate Zoom. It's just like I really would rather be in person." And then the next person, "No, I'm so tired of Zoom and Teams and all these technologies." And everybody was starting to get into this whole negative energy, which is so easy to do. It's like contagious around, "Oh, when are we going to go back so that we can be in person?" And so I really just challenged the group to say, number one, the mindset of gratitude around having technology that's still enabling us to connect with the people that we love, that's enabling us to continue to conduct business, and it's forcing us to be innovative and find new ways to connect with people and do business. So always having this mindset, a reminder of gratitude, that is an emotional state that's opposite to stress, anxiety, what have you, is huge. And then the second thing is self-care. I've coached so many people around COVID. You just have to take more time. Like I've slept longer hours of sleep than I've had my entire career since I started doing like all these Zoom sessions, because it just takes more energy to be present and focus using technology. So more sleep, better diet, more exercise, taking care of myself, surrounding myself with people that believe in me, that are positive influences, has just been everything. And that's the coaching work that I've done with CEOs. It's the self-care that has to dial up, not down.
That's, again, great tips. I'll share a couple of things I've been doing. So I've actually moved some of my calls away from video. So I made a commitment in January that I was going to put every call I did in 2020 on video. And I've decided that I'm taking certain calls every week and doing walk-in calls. And I'm challenging the person on the other end of the phone to pick up your cell phone, put a headset on, and go for a walk with me. we're going to do it in 2 different areas. One person might be in Vancouver, I might be in Toronto, but let's pick a cell phone, let's go for a walk and let's talk. And let's have nature be a part of that. It kind of hits movement, it gets you fresh air. So those are some things I'm doing to help with burnout, and that's kind of managing our team and then talking to customers and feeling and hearing just that stress when they're just sitting at their desk all day long.
Well, and I think that, yes, preserving the amount of time you're on any of these technologies. And then also, Eric, we're fortunate to have ProServe IT as our IT gurus, including you, having the right setup and the right technology so that when you are on, you're just focused on being you and being as high impact as possible. And the technology is not getting in the way and stressing you because you don't have the right setup or you can't hear people, you can't see them or what have you. I think it's huge in terms of minimizing the stress for people.
Excellent. So last question, Nancy, what's a tip or trick that you've done to create connectivity to someone or learn to meet a new person and build a rapid connection where it's probably very easy and natural in person, but how have you done that remotely during the pandemic?
Eric, you know this, I love speed dates. We created this tool at MacKay Forums and it's spreading like wildfire across our community. 20 minutes asking someone for a speed date. And that speed date can be a hot topic speed date. It can be a get new business speed date. It can be a dream building speed date, but essentially you split the time. It can be in person like you talked about, going for a walk. It can be by phone. It can be by Zoom. And it's awkward at first because you're used to just bumping into people and having conversations. But time mastery is all about being very focused and intentional about having real conversations. And so the 20 minutes asking someone, sharing the time, you can go really deep and have great connection in 20 minutes or less.
I will be your loudest cheerleader in this. I've had some amazing speed dates with people where we've both been able to support each other. And I think going into it with the mindset of how can I help you, Nancy, or how can I help Gary when I'm on a speed date with him, that to me was the most important piece of the speed date, was the mindset going in. But I think it's been amazing, and I really appreciate that concept that you've taught me and the peers that I've worked with. I really appreciate your time, Nancy. This has been an amazing chat. I'm sure everyone in our community will get huge value out of understanding how to build a connection remotely. Any last comments to the audience before we sign off?
Well, I just want to say, Eric, thank you so much for inviting me to join you and your inspiring audience here today. If I've served in any way, then a lot of gratitude. And if anybody wants to contact me at mackayforums.com, feel free to do so. And thank you, Eric, for being such an inspiring leader in our MacKay Forums community, and just a lot of gratitude to be able to partner with you.
Thanks very much, Nancy. Bye, everyone, and thank you for joining the Let's Build a Connection session at Connect 2020, and looking forward to seeing you in the different areas of the event. Bye.
Bye, everyone.